Namaste Arunachala Ramanaya. Bola Pundalika Varadhe Hari Vitthale. Namaste and thank you all very much for taking the time to be here this evening. Today we are going to be exploring Dattatreya. And Dattatreya, how many of you are familiar with Dattatreya? You are? Okay, very nice. So, Dattatreya is known as the Guru of Gurus. He is our Adi Guru, right? And there is a lot of stories associated with Dattatreya in our scriptures. We are not going to be able to cover all of those today. But today we are going to be delving into his teachings directly. Okay? Before that, let's start with this shloka, which is also there on the board. Let's chant it together once and then we'll go right into the pravachana. Okay? Jatadharam Pandurangam Shulahastam Kripanidhim Sarvarogaharam Devam Dattatreya Maham Bhaji. Very simply, what it means is the Lord who has the Jatamuni, right? Who has the Jatadhara usually? Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva has the Jatadhara, and here they say Jatadharam Pandurangam. Pandurangam is another name for Vitthal, Krishna. So Jatadharam Pandurangam, Shulahastam Kripanidhim, the one who holds the trident. And the one who is so benevolent, right? He is all about, mercy and wish fulfilling. Sarva roga haram devam. Anything that we have which is of maybe a physical illness, a psychological illness, whatever it is, right? He is there to cure it. He is the panacea for all illnesses. And to that Dattatreya, right from my heart, I bow down to him. That's what this shloka is. Usually when we begin any Dattatreya pravachanam or, even if it is a bhajan or whatever it is, we start with this small little invocation. Om Dhram Dattatreya Namaha. Dhram is the Bij mantra. Bij mantra is the seed mantra. The one that contains the essence of Dattatreya. Right? And what does that dhram mean? It was a new word. The first time I heard it, I was like, what is dhram? Usually we say Om Namo or Hare or something like that, right? Bija mantras are like Ram Krishna Hari or Om is a Bija mantra. It's a single syllable sound. Right? Rama, 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 Rama. It's a Bij mantra, right? It's a seed mantra. You just say, you chant that, and then we are invoking the essence of that deity. So here dhram, if we break it up, the dha stands for dhan or give. As we just spoke about it, right? He is that wish fulfilling. And when we say wish fulfilling, it's not just about wish fulfilling in, okay, maybe in another plane, after this birth. No, even here in this life, in this realm, he is wish fulfilling. For those who want those kind of wishes fulfilled. But if you want higher wishes, spiritually, you want to advance, those are also wishes that Dattatreya fulfills. Right? So that's what the Dha stands for. The Ra, we know from Ram, Ra is the Tattva of fire. Right? It's a very powerful sound, Ra. And that Ra is the fire that burns negative karma, that burns desires, that burns ego. Right? So he is wish fulfilling, he burns karma and desire and ego, and the Ma, as we know from the Om, right? It is the beginning of the end. It is what closes it, right? And it denotes Shiva. Shiva is all about destruction, yeah? So it is the beginning of the end. So Dhram, Om Dhram Dattatreya Namaha. Apdi sollitale, that means Dattatreya is here with us and he's going to guide us today during this pravachana. Right? I'm going to very simply talk a little bit about the symbolism that is associated with Dattatreya, because Dattatreya has been and continues to be quite an enigma in that sense, right? There's a lot about him that is, you know, it's not like we are unsure about it, but he's Shiva, he's also Vishnu, right? He started and created a lot of these, ways of worship. The iconography is very simply about how he looks, his form, what he comes with, what we usually associate him with, right? And as we all know, Dattatreya is the form of the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. And that Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva is probably why in the symbolism, in the pictures that we see the three heads, right, denoting Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. But if we go a little deeper, I think it's not just about the energies of Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, but the three could denote any of these that come in groups of three, past, present, future, right? Our gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, right? And then our states of consciousness, waking, dreaming and deep sleep. It could also be very well, creation, preservation and transformation, which we associate with Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, right? So the symbolism comes from all of these, and that is why we look at these images which come with three heads. Lord Dattatreya is always seen with 4 dogs around him. And generally in Hinduism, we don't associate the dog with any other deity because it's not considered a clean animal. We don't quite think of it as an animal which is, highly elevated like the cow or, the elephant. Yeah? But there is a reason here. The 4 dogs denote the 4 Vedas. The 4 Vedas are loyal to Lord Dattatreya, especially when he has to upkeep dharma, right? And so these are like watchdogs. And when we look at him, there is also this beautiful cow that is always by his side, which is Kamadhenu. Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling cow. And this wish-fulfilling cow is, we saw with the name Dhram, right? Dha, which is all about giving. And usually we have 3 types of, or 3 versions of the Lord, right? We have the Ugra version, the violent, fierce version. And then we have the very Saumya, very friendly, approachable version of the Lord. And we also have the very Jnana version, the knowledge-filled version. Right? The Ugra version of Lord Vishnu, Narasimha, Parashurama, right? The Saumya version, we all know, Lord Krishna, Lord Rama, very approachable, very lovable, right? Dattatreya is the Jnana version of Lord Vishnu. The one who has come to give us the highest truth. The Jnana. Another version of the Jnana, a form of Lord Vishnu could be Hayagrivar, right? So these are all just parts of the symbolism of Lord Dattatreya. Very quickly, let's just dwell a little bit on his birth and his, appearance on this planet, but I don't want to go too deep into that because there are various versions, right? The Brahmanda Purana has a certain version. The Markandeya Purana has another version, right? So there are different versions. I'm just going to talk about one version here, which I thought was a little more scenic, a little more interesting here. He was born to sage Atri and his wife Anasuya. Now sage Atri is one of the Saptarishis. He came from Brahma's mind. He was one of the Manasa Putras of Lord Brahma. And his wife Anasuya was known as a Pativrata. Pativrata is somebody who is very devoted to her husband. Right? Anasuya, we also know from the Ramayana. Atri and Anasuya, we know from the Ramayana when, Lord Rama and Sita went and visited their ashram. Now, the three goddesses, Lakshmi, Saraswati and Parvati, wanted to put Anasuya to a test. Would her Pativrata stand, right, to the test? That's what they wanted to find out. And so they sent their three husbands down to earth, and they took the forms of, sages, and they came down and asked Ma Anasuya for alms. Bhavati Bhikshandehi. And Ma Anasuya, of course, was very happy. She was just going to, serve them when the three gods said that, oh, we are on a very special vrat. You cannot serve us like this. We can only be served by somebody who is free of everything, which means you can't even wear anything while you are serving us. And this confused, and she was in a bit of a dilemma here. How could she do that? Because she's a Pativrata, right? She's very, very devoted to her husband. But at the same time, as a householder, it is her duty to serve these sages. So she meditated on her husband, Atri Maharishi, and the three sages turned into three babies. And then she fed them and she put them to sleep, and Atri Maharishi comes into the hermitage and he realizes what has happened, right? Through his drishti, he knows that these are three gods putting her to test and everything. The three goddesses got a little worried when their husbands didn't come back, and so they came and they saw what happened, and they begged Ma Anasuya to return their husbands to their original form. And Ma Anasuya says, I have already started thinking of them as my babies. And that's when the three lords said that we will come to you as three sons. And so it is said that Brahma came as Soma, representing the sun, Chandra, right? The first son. And then the second son was Dattatreya, and the third was Durvasa. So Brahma, Vishnu and Durvasa was a form of Lord Shiva. Sage Durvasa, you must be familiar, right? The one who gets angry. Yeah? Okay. Now, he didn't, wasn't given the name Dattatreya. Dattatreya was the name that he came with. Datta means give. He was given by the lords, right? And because he was the son of Atri Maharishi, Atreya. So Datta plus Atreya becomes Dattatreya, right? It is also said that when Soma and Durvasa left home or left this realm, they gave their essence, they gave their energies to Dattatreya, which is why we consider him the Trinity. He has the essence of Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. So that is very quickly, one of the legends associated with Dattatreya's birth. But today we are actually going to be jumping into Dattatreya's teachings. Not so much a lot of the other peripheral stories that are associated with Dattatreya, but directly his teachings. And where do we find this teaching? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 11th chapter the Ekadasha Skandam of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Krishna is giving his final teaching to his friend and disciple Uddhava. Lord Krishna has decided to leave, his mortal body, and before he left, he wanted to give his final teaching to Uddhava, right? And that is where all of this happens. Now, Uddhava is not very convinced. He says, Shiva, Krishna, I don't want you to leave me. I want to be with you. I'm not going to be happy without you on this planet. And Krishna says, you have to, right? And he gives many stories, and there are several teachings that, he's kind of sequentially giving Uddhava. And one of those stories is when he says, Uddhava, one of my ancestors, this is Krishna talking, he says, one of my ancestors, my great-great-grandfather, Yadu Maharaj, was walking by the banks of the Kaveri. And there, he was just contemplating on life. He was very disturbed with all of his, the heaviness of wearing that crown, right? And he was just very disturbed and thinking about maybe, how to protect his people or his treasury or whatever. And he was just brooding over all of this. And he looked around him and he saw that all the people there were also rushing somewhere, or they looked like, they had the burden of the world on their shoulders. Nobody was really happy. And he was just thinking, oh my God, what is this life? Right? Look at all of us. I wonder what he would have thought if he saw us today, right? We're talking about back then when he thought that people were burdened with stress. And just as he was brooding and walking by the Kaveri, he sees this Avadhuta. An Avadhuta is a person who is not really bothered by social etiquette, right? He is wandering, and he is somebody who has already attained the highest truth. And Yadu Maharaj looks at this person coming, towards him, and there is a skip in his walk, and there is this certain joy that is, bubbling. And he looks so happy and unattached and free. And Yadu Maharaj is, intrigued. He's like, who is this amongst all these other people who is so happy? And so he goes to that Avadhuta and he says, sir, I know you are a Pandit. I can see that you are a Pandit. Your tejas, your presence, everything tells me you are one. And yet you are behaving and, your presence is like a bala, like a child. How is that? How is that possible? Now here we should also realize that Yadu Maharaj must have been at a certain level to be able to even recognize that presence. There was everybody else also in that, situation, in that scenario. Nobody bothered to go to the Avadhuta and ask him this question, right? It was only Yadu Maharaj. Yadu Maharaj was already a mumukshu. A mumukshu is somebody who is a seeker, who wants to be on the path of finding that highest truth, right? And that is when we understand the power of a certain person's presence. Another way to understand a jnani's presence is also about how much at peace we suddenly become, or how thoughtless, our mind becomes, right? There is that certain quietude that happens in our mind. We know we are in the presence of somebody who is a jnani. And that is what probably Yadu Maharaj realized here, and so he goes and he asks him. And the Avadhuta is Lord Dattatreya here, right? And Dattatreya is very happy that a mumukshu is coming and asking him, seeking this highest truth. Ramana Maharishi used to say, the whole point of an external guru, we all know, we all have read that we need an external guru, right? A living guru. And he says that external guru is simply going to push you to look inwards. And as he is pushing you, your inner guru is going to pull you, right? So with that push and the pull, you are in good hands, right? And when Dattatreya is asked this question of how are you so happy, he says, I have learned from not one or two gurus, but from 24 gurus. And from these 24 gurus, I have learned the science of the self. And that is what we are going to be talking about today. Okay? These are 24 unusual teachers. We are not talking about 24 men or 24 women in saffron robes and, with a halo around them. No, these are very unusual teachers. And these teachers cannot be visible to a learner. They can only be visible to a seeker, right? There's a big difference between a learner and a seeker. I can't but help think of Mahaperiva here. Mahaperiva Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati Swamigal. He used to walk around, right, India. And once he was in Kashi. He used to walk by, he used to go by foot, and he was in Kashi. And the scholars there were a little irritated that he would call himself Jagat Guru, or everybody would address him as Jagat Guru. And so they said, how could you call yourself Jagat Guru? For example, we are not your disciples, right? It's kind of funny that you would bring that title for yourself or assume that title for yourself. And Mahaperiva, in all humility, he says, it is not that I am the Guru for the Jagat, but all of the Jagat is my Guru, right? The whole world is my Guru. I am not the Guru to anybody or everybody in this world. And that is what we're going to be talking about here. How everything is a teaching, and everybody in our lives in this world is a teacher. If only we are available to that teaching. All of these teachers are around us, available, giving us these learnings and lessons every moment. And so he starts. He says, my very first guru was Bhuma Devi, Mother Earth. And what did I learn from Mother Earth? Endurance, patience, forgiveness, tolerance. We do a whole lot of harm, right? We drill, we plow, we spit, we dirty, we do a whole lot of things on the surface of Mother Earth. And yet, what does she give us back in return? Only things that nourish us, right? Oxygen, food, crops, fruit, flowers, everything that nourish us. So Dattatreya says, I learned from Mother Earth that regardless of whatever is done to me, I bear it, I endure it, but I don't hold a grudge against anybody. I only do good back to them. And I was reminded of Eknath Maharaj's story here, Shanti Brahma Eknath, right? Shanti Brahma Eknath is one of those great sages from the Bhakta Vijayam, Lord Vithal's disciple, right? Devotee. And once Shanti Brahma Eknath had gone down to the Godavari for his morning bath, and he had a few detractors in the village, right? People who were jealous of him, who didn't like him, right? And they had hired a man just to get Eknath Maharaj angry. So they told this man, you do whatever you want to, we'll give you the money, but we want you to get this Eknath irritated. So this man, he chewed a whole lot of bitter leaves, and he was waiting and ready for Eknath Maharaj to come. And just as he was emerging all clean and pure from his bath, this man with all the red spit in his mouth, spat on Eknath Maharaj. Eknath Maharaj didn't even look up to see who spat on him. He just went back to the Godavari, took another bath, dip, came back. This man did it again. He went, took a bath, came back again. This went on 40 times. 40 times. Until the man who was spitting couldn't take it anymore. He went and fell at Maharaj's feet and said, how is this possible? Right? And Eknath Maharaj said, first, thank you. Oh, so it was you who did this. First, thank you, because today I got to bathe in the holy Godavari 40 times, which I've never done before. And then he said, how are you not getting angry, Maharaj? And he said, see, what you did, you defiled only this body, right? This body, which is anyway, according to me, not real, right? It's a waste product, right? So I'm not going to be worried about that, and that is something that can easily be cleaned. But if I had said a harsh word, if I had gotten angry, something deeper inside would have gotten dirty. How do I clean that? This body I can clean any number of times, but how do I clean the dirt in my mind? And Eknath Maharaj has lived what Lord Dattatreya is talking about in terms of endurance. And he says, that is something I have learned from Mother Earth. And then he says, the next guru was water. Water, anything that comes in contact with water gets purified. Right? And so he says, I have realized that I can purify myself. I can first free myself of ego, of anger, of desires. And once I am pure, I have the capacity then to make anybody else who comes in contact with me also pure. And that is something I learned from water. I also learned from water that just like how they are always moving, right? Water is free flowing. As a yogi, as a sannyas, I should also be moving, because if I stay somewhere, I become like stagnant water, which is of no use to anybody. My third guru is fire. Anything you put in fire gets absorbed by fire, right? Wood, cloth, leaves, paper, anything. It gets absorbed. The same way, I learned that whatever happens in my life, I absorb it and turn it into that bright flame of learning and enlightenment. And that is what I learned from fire. Another thing I learned from fire is that fire is very hidden. In a matchbox, there is fire, right? But we don't see it unless it is sparked. There is fire in the stone, but it is not visible. The same way, as a yogi, I want to be quiet and hidden. I don't want to go and tell everybody that, hey, look at me, look at the kind of bhakti I'm doing. Look at how powerful I can be with my siddhis. I just remain quiet and I become visible only when necessary. And that is something I learned from fire. And then the wind or air. When we talk about air, it's both the air inside within our body and the air outside, right? For the air inside, we call it prana, right? The prana that we take in and leave out. What does that prana need? Is it asking us for anything to function well? All it needs is food. Food is what gets directly converted into prana, which is why we say have a lot more pranic food, right? Other than that food, it doesn't need anything else. I learned that I have to live simply with very basic necessities as a yogi. I also learned that air is so free moving, right? It goes to a garden, it picks up certain fragrances. After that, if it goes somewhere else and if there is a bad odor, it picks it up. But it doesn't remain with those odors or fragrances for a long time. The air as such has no smell, right? The same way, as I am moving about, I will come across and meet good people, bad people, selfish, greedy, whatever. But I should not take on any of their qualities, and I should be free moving. Space. Space is what holds everything. The sun, the clouds, the stars, everything is held in space. But space is not connected to anything. The same way, this body is all the parts of the body, everything is standing on the power of the Atman, right? But I know that my Atman is not connected to the kidney or the liver or the lungs or anything, right? The same way, I need to be unattached. And that is what I learned from space. So the very first 5 lessons are from the Panchabhutas. And then he goes on. The moon. We have the Paurnami and the Amavas, right? On a monthly basis, the waxing and the waning of the moon. Does the moon change? Does anything at all happen to the moon? Nothing. Nothing. We know that the moon is whole. It is full always. But we see it waxing and waning and rising and falling. Dattatreya says, I have learned from the moon that the human body is akin to that. For a certain point in our lives, we are growing. And after a certain point in our lives, everything stops, right? And it's declining. All this is just illusory. Nothing is real. In reality, I am whole. I am Purna, like the Chandra. The sun. The sun picks up water from all sources on earth. The fields, the rivers, the oceans, the sea, right? It just takes in water, converts it into life-giving rain, and showers that rain on everybody regardless of whether they are worthy of it or not. The same way, I have learned that I will acquire knowledge from all sources, and then I will convert it into simplified versions and share it with everybody without any preference. And then we come to something very normal that we see in our everyday lives, right? Until now it was the sun and the moon and the air and the Panchabhutas, and now he talks about a flock of pigeons. I learned a lot from these pigeons, he says. There was this mother and the father pigeon. It was such a joy to watch them come together, and then they built a nest, right? It was also gratifying for me. I was just observing them. And then they had their babies, and then they were taking care of their babies. And then suddenly one day a hunter came, and all the babies were caught in the hunter's net. And that made me very sad. But what came after that was what shocked me. The mother pigeon saw all these babies in the net, and without thinking, she jumped right into the net herself, and she was also caught. The father pigeon was, he was shocked to see his entire family caught. He also jumped right into the net, and it was a field day for the hunter. And he says, Lord Dattatreya says, when I saw the hunter taking all of these pigeons and walking away, I knew that was Kala Purusha. That nothing is permanent. None of that happiness is permanent. And also, with attachment comes bondage. If the mother or the father, if they were not blindly attached to those babies, they could have figured out how to save the babies. Instead, all of them jumped into the net because of that blind attachment. So the more we get attached to our relations, it is going to create pain. It doesn't mean don't love your relations. Love, very different to attachment. In Tamil, we call it pasam, right? Pasam is a slippery slope, and that is the danger here, right? True love is, you're not expecting anything, you're not seeking anything out of it. It is only in that moment that allows you to think. But attachment doesn't allow us to think, which is why most times if you look at it, surgeons will never operate on their children or their kith or kin because of that attachment, right? They may not be able to think clearly while performing. And then he talks about a python. He says, I was just observing this python and it was unmoving. It was just lying there. And I was thinking, how is this python going to fend for itself, right? How is it going to eat? And just as I was thinking that, a rabbit passed by and the python caught it and ate it. That's when I realized that the python eats what comes its way. It doesn't go and seeks food, right? It doesn't go and look for food. Oh, today I feel like eating something specific. I will go buy the ingredients. I will make it. None of that. If it comes my way, good enough. That is what we call the ajagara vritti. Ajagara vritti. Right? Ajagara vritti is without any like or dislike. That is the food that I will accept, because that is what the Lord has decided to give me today. When Ramana Maharishi first came to Tiruvannamalai, the very first meal that he got was from another, beggar. And it was stale, rancid, old rice. And he says, I still can't forget the taste of that divine rice, because that was my very first offering from Arunachala. That is Ajagara Vritti, right? Whatever comes my way, I accept it, I take it. It's a lot about acceptance. Spirituality, the very first step of spirituality itself is accept, accept, accept. Accept all that is happening, right? The ocean was my 10th guru. There's a lot of movement, right, with the waves. Waves are splashing, there's noise, there is a lot of movement in the periphery of the ocean. But if you look a little further inside, it is serene, it is deep, right? And it is very still. I learned that regardless of whatever happens in the periphery of my life, there could be joyous occasions, there could be sadness, there could be achievements, there could be celebrations. Regardless of whatever happens in the outer periphery, deep inside, I should be like that ocean, unmoving, still, serene. And all the rivers go and empty themselves in the ocean. But the ocean never rises or, shrinks. The same way, whatever comes my way into my life, I remain unmoving. And then the next 5 are about senses. Sensory pleasures, right? That's why I've just highlighted those 5. The first one, the firefly, the moth, is attracted to light, sense of sight. It is so attracted to light that at some point it goes closer and closer and closer and gets consumed by that light, by the fire. It gets burnt. How much we all are attracted by this sense of sight, right? We want things that are shiny, we want to acquire, we want to see things. Oh, there was a movie that was released yesterday, I want to see it. Oh, there is a show that somebody recommends, I want to see it. Is that helping us grow? If it does, great. Because, it is a sense that has been given to us to use. But if it is going to taint our mind in some way, then it is not helping us, right? That was not what it was meant for. So from the moth, I learned not to go after things just because they look good or just because they are shiny, right? What they mean here is gold, right? So don't go after gold or material, wealth. The next thing I learned was from the bee. Sense of smell. The bee moves from one flower to another, attracted by the powerful fragrance of those flowers. And sometimes, while it is still inside a flower, the flower closes and it is trapped, right? So I learned from the bee again that my sense of smell could also bring my downfall if not used right. I also learned from the bee another lesson. The bee goes and carefully collects small amounts of honey from one flower to another, and it amasses it, only for a beekeeper to come and take it all away in one shot. So I learned not to just collect wealth, because I know that at some point somebody else is going to enjoy it. Somebody else is going to take it all away one day. So I'm not going to waste my life just amassing that wealth. The elephant is very attracted by the touch of the female elephant. And this is about the sense of touch. So I will not fall prey to that. And then the deer, the hunter, if he has to catch a deer, he will play a beautiful melody. And the deer is always, it is mesmerized by these lilting tunes that it goes and falls, in the hunter's trap. Again, what we hear is also what we consume. We think what we consume is only the food that we eat. We are so concerned about the right food, the right diet. Is it healthy? Is it pranic? Is it sattvic? Is what we are hearing sattvic? Maybe, maybe not, right? Gossip, rumors, there's so much happening around us. How much of us do we want to give to what we hear? Because that also affects our mind. And finally, the fish. The fish is about the taste. All we have to do is put in a small little bait on the hook. The fish is enticed by that and gets caught. And I don't think I need to even say enough about how we are all enticed by that sense of taste. How much of our time and lives we spend behind that sense of taste, right? And with that, he talks about the 5 senses and how he learned from these very everyday animals, everyday insects, about how he should keep his senses in control, in discipline, because that is primary for a yogi. And then we come to the most interesting guru, if you ask me, Pingala. Pingala was a prostitute. And Lord Dattatreya says, she was one of my gurus. He says, I was just walking around and I came into the land of Videha. Videha is Lord Janaka's land. Right? And then he says, I was just staying opposite this Pingala's house and I got the chance to observe her. And she decked herself and she came out and she was, prancing here and there, hoping that somebody would come. The whole evening she waited and she waited and she waited, but nobody came. And suddenly she had this deep vairagya. Vairagya is dispassion. She had this deep sense of dispassion and she said, who am I waiting for? Who have I, been looking out for? For people who don't love me. Do I love them? No. But I have spent all of these hours, this entire evening, waiting for these people only because I'm hoping for some material gain out of it. And she said, for that material gain, I have, wasted all of this time. from now I am not going to do that. And Vairagya is instantaneous. We don't have to spend too much time, right? We have to spend lifetimes establishing that Vairagya. But when Vairagya happens, it is instantaneous, right? It's a moment. There is a story where this wife goes and complains to her husband about her brother who has been threatening to take sannyas. So she says, my brother has been saying he wants to take sannyas. I'm very worried. You should go talk to him. What if he really does it? And blah, blah, blah. She goes on and on and on. And the husband is not, even answering. And then she gets angry with her husband and she says, you don't care about my family. You don't even bother what's happening with this brother. How can you, behave like this? The husband says, you know what? Your brother will never take sannyas. And then he removes his dhoti and he says, but today I am taking sannyas, and he leaves. And that is how much of time it takes for Vairagya to happen. And Pingala showcased that. She said, from today, I am going to build my relationship with the one constant. Not with all of these people who come and go in my life, but with that one constant who is my God. And I'm going to be devoted to him henceforth. And Lord Dattatreya says, from Pingala I learned how to live with Vairagya. And it's a good question for all of us to ask. What are we selling? Pingala was selling her body. What are we selling? We are selling our time. We are selling our values. We are selling our self-respect in return for material gains. So it is a time to pause and think, what am I selling and how can I get that Vairagya? Or at least on the path of that. And as I was leaving Pingala's house, Lord Dattatreya says, I was just looking up in the sky and I saw this hawk. And there was a whole, murder of crows following that hawk. Wherever the hawk went, the crows would go. If the hawk sat down, the crows would all sit around it. And I was thinking, why are these hawks, these crows following the hawk? And then suddenly the hawk spit out a piece of meat that it was holding. And the moment it let go of that piece of meat, all the crows left that hawk in peace. I learned that the more I have these attachments or property or anything that I call mine, there will always be people around me wanting it. There will always be, ashanti. I'm never going to be at peace. We talk about ahankar a lot, right? Ego. But there is also mamakar. Mamakar is anything that we say that is mine. He is, my son, or she is my daughter. Then it's a very different feeling, right? Or that is my house. Then even a small crack there in the house becomes a big deal, right? If it's somebody else's house, okay, let it be. I'm not so bothered, right? That mamakar is something that I have learned to let go of from that hawk. Again, there's this story of Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh was a Vietnamese Zen monk. And he was with his followers. A cowherd comes and he's very disturbed. And he's asking Thich Nhat Hanh and his disciples, have you seen my cow? I've lost it. Did it come this way? Please, sir, tell me. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, sorry, we didn't see the cow. And he goes. And Thich Nhat Hanh looks at his disciples and says, how lucky we are that we don't have any cows to lose. Right? The more we have, the more there is that worry of something being robbed, something being damaged, something being affected. When you don't even have those cows, then how can it ever get lost? Right? And that is what I learned from the hawk. A baby. I saw this baby with no ego at all. It was just moving so freely, so happily. We always say, right, we should try and be childlike, not childish. Even as we are growing, as we are aging, we should always keep that childlike spirit without holding grudges, without having any bias, treating everybody alike and being joyful in that moment. The child always knows how to come back to the moment, because only the moment is real. And after that, I was just begging for alms, and I came to a house where I got to observe a little bit about what was going on inside that house. There was a young girl, and she was pounding the grain, right? With her 2 hands, she was pounding the grain. And as she was pounding, there was a lot of noise coming from her, 1 dozen bangles on each hand. And they had guests, and these guests were actually people who had come for the bride viewing of this girl. And she suddenly became very shy that, her pounding was actually making noise, and it was attracting attention from the guests. So she very quickly, she removed a few of her bangles and kept it aside and continued with her work. And she realized still it was making noise. She removed a few more, and she was left with only 2 on each side. And she continued pounding. And even those 2, there was still some noise. Not as much as before, but there was still some noise. And finally, she removed even that and left only 1 bangle on each hand. And then there was no noise. It was just silence. From that young girl, I learned that especially on this path of enlightenment, I need to be alone. Because even if there is one other person, there will be arguments. There will be noise, and that is not good for me. I need that silence, and that silence I will only get in solitude. Being in a group is not wrong. Of course, satsang like this is great. Bhajan, you need a group. You can't do a bhajan, in solitude, right? But if you need to meditate, if you need to contemplate, you need to be alone. And that I learned from that young girl. And then I was coming by and I saw this snake that was slithering into a rat's hole. And I was wondering, what is it doing inside a rat's hole? The snake never builds a home for itself. It always goes and takes the home of somebody else. Somebody else, like it could be a rabbit, it could be a rat, and the snake will very comfortably go and take that space and make it its home. He says, I learned that I don't need to build my own house as a sannyasi, as a yogi. I can just take shelter in a cave, maybe in a temple, whatever is available, the porch of somebody's home, and that is good enough. Like that snake, I will also learn to live in the cave of my heart, Hridaya Guhara. Right? In the cave of my heart. That's what he means. Not just living in a cave, elsewhere. We don't just talk about it in a physical sense, but I should learn more to live within the cave of my heart. And I saw this big procession. The king was just coming with his soldiers and retinue, and all of them, they were going, and everybody was cheering and looking at that procession, except for this one person. He was making these arrowheads, and he was so engrossed in his work that he didn't even bat an eyelid. He didn't even lift his head to see what was happening. No king, no soldier, no procession, nothing. He didn't even know what was happening around him. He was so focused and engrossed in making those arrowheads, which made me wonder, how much of focus he should have if he cannot even hear what is happening outside. I realized that I need that kind of single-minded focus on my path to that highest truth. We actually call those states flow states. I'm sure you would have experienced it at some point in your life, right? It could have been maybe when you were painting or cooking or any activity that we truly love. Time stands still. We say it, right? Oh my God, I didn't even realize. It's been 2 hours, it's been 3 hours. Why? Because we were so absorbed. There was no ego there. There was no doership there, right? There was only that flow of doing. And the more we get into those flow states, that's already a great start towards that spiritual path. The spider wove a beautiful web. It came out into that web, played there, and maybe even sought shelter there for a while, and then it withdrew that whole web into itself. Which is how Atman behaves, which is how Brahman behaves, right? Everything on this earth has come from that one Brahman. And then he does all his Leela here through us. And then he also withdraws all of it back into himself. And from the spider, I was reminded of how the whole world functions. And the last two. The wasp, when it goes and gets a worm, right, for it to feed on later, it first brings the worm, gives it a bit of a sting, and leaves it there. This worm is thinking of that sting that it, got from that wasp. It is constantly fearing that the wasp is going to come and do it again, right? Sting it again. Everything for the worm is just about the wasp. And you know what? One day it actually gets transformed into that wasp. Because it is constantly thinking about the wasp. And I learned that what I think is who I become. So if I am going to think of God or think of Brahman, I am going to become that one day. And finally, it is about the human body. My human body is a privilege, it's a gift. And that gift was not just meant for us to come here, have a good time, enjoy, watch a movie, eat good food, travel, and then go. If we do that, we will go and come back, go and come back, and that's going to be a cycle, never-ending cycle. This body was given to me as a very efficient tool to attain a certain purpose. And that purpose is solely enlightenment, self-realization. Who am I, right? And this body is going to decay. This body is going to be disposed of one day. And before it is disposed of, I have to use it today. I have to realize that the clock is ticking when it comes to this human body. And I have to use it towards that higher purpose that it was gifted to me for. And that is something that I learned from the human body. And so from these 24 gurus of mine, I have established the science of self. And all of this appears in something called the Avadhuta Gita. We don't just have one Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. We have the Avadhuta Gita, we have the Uddhava Gita. There are multiple Gitas. And in the Avadhuta Gita, it is pure Advaita. It is the essence of Lord Krishna's last teachings. where he says, you first understand who you are. You have to keep asking that question of who am I? You don't need to seek an answer for it, because there is no answer to it. But the more you keep asking that question of who you are, you will get closer to that truth. You will find the answers from within or from outside, from nature, from a person. Right? And it is important for us to understand and realize that everything around us is Maya. Everything is illusory. And the moment we realize that, we are fighting this restless mind. The mind is restless. And that restless mind falls prey to this illusory Maya, this earth, this world. Because everything is being projected out of this mind. Everybody's world is different, right? My world is very different to yours, because that's what the mind is projecting. And that we need to know that there is this speck of Brahman inside all of us. And ultimately, when we think about it, it is that same Brahman in all of us, just like how it is that same electricity that is making this air conditioner work, this microphone work, this computer work, this phone work. Everything is run by that electricity. And it's the same thing. That same Brahman is operating out of all of us. But of course, we all look different because of our innate tendencies, our vasanas. Our innate tendencies that we have acquired over birth, so many lifetimes. But otherwise, at the core of it, we are the same. So where is the question of raga or dvesha? Raga or dvesha is, oh, I prefer this person, or I don't like this person. Where is the question of that? Because ultimately, at the core of it, we are all one and the same. And that is the essence of Dattatreya's teachings. And he says, you know, you don't have to do any very elaborate rituals, puja, nothing. His teaching is very simple. Be kind. Feed whoever is hungry, whether it's an animal, human, you know, don't, stay away from doing seva. Contemplate. Whenever you find time, contemplate. Simple. That is it. That is Dattatreya's teachings. Right? But he has deep insights through these 24 gurus. The 24 gurus, we went in jet speed today because we wanted to cover all 24. But if you really contemplate on each one, we can go so deep. And it will tell us so much about our reality, our consciousness. And that is what we want. And if you really look back, Lord Dattatreya is at the core of all of our sampradayas. The Natha Sampradaya, right? Gorakhnath, Matsyendranath, these are all, it's a group of people, right? They follow certain teachings. The Natha Sampradaya, it starts with Adinath, who is seen as Lord Shiva. In this case, Adinath is Lord Dattatreya. The essence of Lord Dattatreya, the Shiva energy, is Adinath. And from there comes the Nath tradition. And then the Sri Vidya Upasana, which is all about the Mother Goddess, the Shakta tradition, right? Lalita Tripura Sundari, right? Prayer to the Mother Goddess. That is also from Lord Dattatreya. He gave these lessons to Parashurama. And Parashurama codified it, and from there came the book Tripura Rahasyam. Lord Dattatreya is also, at the core of the Aghori tradition. You might have heard of the Aghoris in Varanasi. Right? It's a very different form of worship, where they harness the power of fear and use it for something greater, something bigger. A lot of our traditions, a lot of our, spiritual routines, spiritual disciplines go back to Guru Dattatreya, which is why we call him the Adi Guru. It is not just another title. Everything stems from Lord Dattatreya. Even Guru Gobind Singh from Sikhism, he has written a book called Rudra Avatar just about Lord Dattatreya. Right? There's so much about him in all of these other religions also that have stemmed from Sanatana Dharma, where Lord Dattatreya is at the center of it. And there are many pilgrimages, many places of power and energy of Dattatreya. There are about 16 all over India, but some of the very famous ones are in Gujarat, Karnataka, Andhra, and there are a few in Maharashtra as well. It's mostly in those areas where Lord Dattatreya's worship is still very prevalent. And he has had several avatars. Lord Dattatreya has had several avatars. Some of these, what you can see here, even Lord, Shirdi Sai Baba is supposedly an avatar of Dattatreya. So yes, he is a guru, he is a guide, he is a divine healer whose energy we can still feel even today. And that's the beauty. Certain gurus like Hanumanji, right? They are all always here on this plane, ready and waiting to help seekers who are authentic in their search. Lord Dattatreya is one such. And this is a good time for us to reflect on his eternal wisdom and ask a couple of questions, to ourselves. How are we being available to all of these teachers around us? When I say teachers, it could be a difficult colleague. It could be a mean relative. It could be a friend who has stabbed you at the back, right? They are also our teachers, because all of these people have been very specially sent to our lives. It's a curated syllabus, right? The same syllabus doesn't work for another person. So the people who come into our lives are also there for a very special reason. What is that lesson that I'm learning from them? Instead of asking that question, oh, why has this happened to me? Why me? Why has this person, come in and, giving me so much of pain? Instead of asking, why is it happening to me? We have to ask, why is this happening for me? The moment we change that one word, we become curious about, okay, what's the lesson there? Why has this person come, right? And we also need to ask, how can we make ourselves more available to all of these teachings around us? So there are these flocks of pigeons and serpents and rabbits and all that we saw. It's always around us. What are we really learning from them? Nothing much, because we are in a rush. The universe is not in a rush. We are in a rush, which is why we experience anxiety, stress. Until we learn our lessons, we are not going to be let off. Just like how a student is never let off until he passes and completes that grade, correct? We have to learn the lessons. But for that, we have to first elevate ourselves. We have to learn to go with the flow. Learn to align with that larger rhythm that the universe has curated for us. And when we follow that flow of that universe, we are already in good hands. We don't have to worry after that, right? Because the Guru is within. The Guru is within, constantly guiding us. But do we hear that Guru? It's a very submerged voice. We've buried it so deep inside that even if that Guru screams, we can't hear. with all the noise outside. Which means, how do I quieten my surroundings, my life, my mind? How do I still this mind? Because only when I still it, am I going to be able to hear those little whispers, the whispers from inside, the whispers from, my gurus outside. That is when I will be attuned to what is happening, and then I can pick up on those lessons. Right? So we have to delve within, and as we find the courage to delve within, I'm sure we will be guided by this wonderful divine presence of Lord Dattatreya. Om Dram Dattatreya Namaha. Thank you very much.